Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We had just wrapped up talking about Joel Embiid, his injury, and the 65-game minimum for these All-NBA awards. Now, a certain player on the other side of this 76ers-Warriors game that just took place last night sort of chimed into the issue as well. That would be none other than Draymond Green. And just sort of to tie these two ideas in a little bit, he was actively on the court against Joel Embiid, and he talked about how he saw Embiid forcing himself through this injury, and that if it weren't for these rules, and of course pride takes a little bit of a role in this as well, considering the fact of how much scrutiny Embiid has been receiving through the past week or so. Specifically, I mean, it's been all season, but specifically since Saturday night when he missed that game against the Nuggets, it has been a lot of backlash for him, for a guy who has just been injured. And I know that it's so easy for us on our couches to be like, you should be playing that game, but would we really rather see Embiid force himself through an injury for some of these regular season games, or would we rather see him performing in the playoffs? As a Celtics fan, I would maybe rather not see him in the playoffs to make my favorite team's route easier. But as basketball fans as a whole, we should obviously all want Embiid to show up in the playoffs, and Draymond Green sort of touched on this on his podcast as well. But sort of shifting to Draymond Green here, I talked about the Warriors last week after their close loss on Thursday night to the Sacramento Kings. I asked the question, is this Warriors core past the point of contention? And the consensus I sort of landed on is yes, because in my opinion, if Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green in the year 2024 are your three best players, I don't know that you have a championship team anymore, just by the way that the league has gotten so much better. And I mean, specifically Klay, and it sucks because Klay Thompson, he's an unbelievable personality. He seems like everybody that comes in contact with him loves him. He's just not the same version. He suffered 2 catastrophic injuries that kept him out for a couple seasons. And while any progress that he's made towards coming back is a positive, and on some nights he shows up and he's the Klay that we watched during the dynasty years for the Warriors, on a night-to-night basis, he is not the same. He is nowhere near the same defensively. I think that people forget that, yes, it's the shooting with him, but he was so good on defense during those prime Warriors years, and he's just not that anymore. They won the title, obviously, in 2022, but that's because they had Andrew Wiggins emerge, and he was phenomenal for them on both sides. He was an all-world defender, shutting down Jason Tatum in that finals, and he was an all-star starter that season. He was so good, and now he can't shoot. Again, he was solid last night. He's fine, and maybe the thing is, when you look at those 4, you can't help but feel a little bit that there's a chance that they could turn this thing around if all of their individual players raise their play and return to the versions that we have seen in the past. I don't know if they can do that for 4 straight series, a month of basketball being that night in, night out team that we saw a couple of seasons ago. I talked about the fact as well that I thought that they were in a tough position based off of the fact that obviously Steph Curry is still Steph Curry, but they're paying all of this money to Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Andrew Wiggins. And Klay isn't expiring, so he's a little bit more flexible. Not that I think that they would trade him based off of just the history behind that. I think that at this point he's a little bit of a statue guy, for lack of a better term, somebody that he has been such an important pillar of this team for a decade now, that to ship him off I don't think that that would totally feel right, and I don't think that they would do it. Even though their general manager, Mike Dunleavy Jr., did just step in for Bob Myers. So it's not like it's the same GM that's been with them through this whole run, but you get the point. I think that it would be pretty unexpected in my eyes for them to move him. Draymond Green, they just signed to a new contract for $100 million over 4 years this offseason. And Andrew Wiggins still has a few years left on his contract. He has a player option in a couple years that'll bump up to $30 million. And he, at this point, is probably more of a negative asset than anything. Can he turn himself around? It's still maybe very possible. We don't really have the answers as to what was happening with him last season when he missed all of those games for personal reasons. So maybe there's some sort of a mental block. We saw maybe a little bit. This is probably a little bit of an unfair statement, but I think that he elevated his game, if I can try and spin it in a more positive light. He wasn't the full version of himself in Minnesota because he didn't have the exterior factors to help make him want to put in the work, and it sort of put in some negative reinforcement energies from the Timberwolves, who never had a great culture themselves. And I think that once he went to the Warriors, he was really able to elevate his game because of the fact that he had the likes of a Steph Curry and a Draymond Green to sort of take his game to that next level and be the impact starter that he was for the finals run. Now, to get back to Draymond in all of this, I think that he has been extremely valuable for the Warriors since coming back from the suspension. He was on a minutes restriction early, obviously, because he missed as much time as he did, but since then, he has sort of elevated that. They actually removed the minutes restrictions from him during that Lakers game, and he was extremely impactful. And I've never been a fan of plus minus necessarily. I think it's a little bit of a reductive stat. It obviously has a lot to do with the other players that are on the court with you, but he has been a plus 83 in the last 5 games that he's played since returning from his suspension. And this is a plus 83 in a stretch where the Warriors have been 2-3. So it's not even like they're winning these games significantly. He was a plus 31 in a loss to the Lakers. I think he's been so impactful on both sides of the ball. Defense is sort of a given with him, the way that he can impact the game. But I think especially too, what flies under the radar a little bit with him is the playmaking. He's averaging 7 assists per game. He has multiple games with 11 assists in this span. And I think that part of his other addition to this team is the fact that he and Steph Curry just have this chemistry and connection that makes Steph Curry such an effective player. And Steph Curry, it doesn't take a lot necessarily for him to have to be an effective player. That's just who he is individually anyways. But I think that Draymond, with some of the stuff that he does off the ball and the understanding that the two of them have with one another, just makes him that much better. Steph Curry, 3 straight games with 30 points for him. And I know that, again, this is Steph Curry. He's averaging 27.5 on the season, so it's not like this is some outlandish mark for him by any means. But I think that it's just the impact and the level of winning that he brings is so big for this Warriors team. And I think that if you sort of look at the idea of the Warriors trying to reconcile some of this season as they currently sit sub 500, currently the 12th seed in the Western Conference, they have a little bit of makeup ground to cover in order to even get to the play-in tournament. And that's where, again, you're talking about you have room to make up to get to the play-in, and you expect this team to be a contender. I don't really, but I do think that it's something that we as NBA fans kind of have to acknowledge a little bit what's going on with Draymond, because there's a reason this guy's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I know that his box score stats don't always jump out at you, but he has been such an important piece of this Warriors dynasty, and you can see the difference from when he's on the court versus when he's off the court. And I think that as much as we can criticize him, we do also need to take those moments every once in a while and appreciate. I know his greatness looks very different from the greatness of a Luka Doncic scoring 73 points or a LeBron James on Saturday night against them going 20 points, 20 rebounds with a handful of assists as well. I think he had a 2020 triple-double with that as well. Just ridiculous stuff. But greatness comes in different forms. And in today's NBA, it's obviously so offensive-oriented, shot-making-oriented, but there's more to it, and that's why he is going to be a Hall of Famer. I've never been the biggest Draymond Green fan in my life, really. He's come and gone with me, I think, at times. There was that stage where kicking LeBron James and getting himself suspended in the finals, that's an incredibly infuriating moment for me. And then, I think he was sort of coming along, but then he also pushes a Kevin Durant out of the building, which again, selfishly as a Celtics fan, and I think most NBA fans were probably like, thank you, Kevin Durant is no longer on the Warriors. We can finally have some parity again. But it's kind of a boneheaded move, to be honest, to push away one of the greatest scorers of all time off your team for whatever reasons behind the scenes that was for him. And then he sort of little brothered my Celtics in the 2022 finals. He made it clear that they weren't mentally ready for the moment, which was true in the moment, but I personally didn't really care for it because, I was rooting for the Celtics. So I think that all in all, I'm saying a lot right now and giving Draymond this praise that I don't even know if it's totally warranted, because I can't tell what the public perception of Draymond Green is as far as how great of a player all time is he. Now, again, sort of just to wrap up this segment, linking it back to the Warriors and is this team past the point of contention, I think that they probably are. And I don't think they're going to be making any moves, but could Draymond be an impact guy on a winning team somewhere else? I don't think the Warriors are going to be selling off. I think that he could very much be an impact guy on a Sacramento Kings, a team that hasn't really had a ton of playoff experience other than last year going to Game 7 against the Warriors themselves. But, you look at the teams that were interested in him in free agency, it was reportedly the Kings, the Trailblazers, and the Pistons. Draymond does nothing, I don't think, except for, you can make the mental edge argument, but I think Draymond would just be fed up trying to play with that Pistons team. Would they be better for it today? Definitely. But I don't think that he would be happy with it, and I don't think that the Pistons should be giving up assets to be trying to get him. So could a Sacramento trade for him? Could a Lakers trade for him? I don't love the Lakers fit because they already struggle with shooting as it is, but their defense hasn't been great as of late anyways as well. So I think that he's staying put on the Warriors, but he is just such an interesting and unique case, I think, in the NBA today. So we are going to be taking another break. When I come back on the other side, we just talked about the different forms of greatness. Going to continue that conversation a little bit, talking about Jason Tatum and the Celtics and why his greatness a lot of the time looks different in a team environment than the individual high-scoring performances. So we will be taking a quick break. Stick with us.